In Daniel chapter 9, Daniel is reading the book of Jeremiah and is making up the math of how much more time the people in Israel would be in exile in Babylon. The people of Israel were in Babylon because time and time again they would ignore God's prophets and abide in paganism. Therefore, after so many chances, God took away his protection and the Babylonian Empire, King Nebuchadnezzar, took the Hebrews into captivity. Therefore, Daniel was sad and worried, sad that Israel no longer existed and preoccupied. If there was no Israel, how was the Messiah going to come, as stated in the prophecy? With these thoughts, Daniel begins to pray to God, and he receives an answer. An angel comes and gives him a vision. He tells Daniel, "I have come forth to give you the skill to understand." He then gives Daniel the explanation of the 70 weeks. It is known as the 70 weeks prophecy of Daniel. In this prophecy, God is telling Daniel that there is a second chance for Israel to not worry. Even if it seems incredible, the walls will be rebuilt. Even if everything is destroyed, the temple will be rebuilt. The Messiah will come, he will be anointed, make an end to sins, and he shall confirm a covenant with many. Israel gets a second chance. Daniel is relieved. Now, let's look at this prophecy and see what it means. First, there is something you should know, and it's very important. Let me give you the code to understand this prophecy. Whenever we talk about Bible prophecy, one day represents 1 year. Wait, what? Yes, that's correct. And I'll repeat it. One day in Bible prophecy symbolizes 1 year. You might be asking, wait, how? Well, let's allow the Bible to speak for itself. In Numbers 14:34, it says, "Each day for a year." We can also find another verse to help us out in Ezekiel 4:6. "I have assigned you 40 days, a day for each year." So, there you have it, the code to help us out. Now, let's do some quick math. If you hate math, don't worry. I personally hated math in school, but I promise that this math is easy. Okay, so the angel gave Daniel a prophecy of 70 weeks, correct? Now, we know from the verses, Numbers 14:34 and Ezekiel 4:6, that one day is equivalent to 1 year. How many days in a week? I'll give you a few seconds. If you got 7, good work. Now, here's the big one. How many days in 70 weeks? Ooh, I got you there, didn't I? Hey, it's no biggie. Let's use the calculator. I'm going to multiply 7 representing days in a week times 70 representing the weeks of the prophecy. What's the answer? Boom! 490. Alright, since it's a Bible prophecy, are we going to say 490 days or 490 years? Based on what we just learned, it's going to be 490 years because remember, 1 day equals 1 year. And it's based on Ezekiel 4:6 and Numbers 14:34. I know I keep repeating this, but it's important, so I'll keep doing it. It makes sense because if it were days, Jerusalem couldn't have been rebuilt in 490 days. It just doesn't make sense. But it makes sense if it were years. Alright, so let's begin with the prophecy. In Daniel 9:24, it starts out like this. 70 weeks are determined for your people and for your holy city. Here we can see that prophetic 70 weeks or 490 years, like we just went over, are determined for Israel. The rest of this verse, we see what these 70 weeks will bring. It states, to finish the transgression, to make an end of sins, to make reconciliation for iniquity, to bring in everlasting righteousness, to seal up the vision and prophecy, and to anoint the most holy. Here we see that in these 70 weeks, there will be someone who will fix the sin problem and make a reconciliation. And most importantly, in this prophecy, the most holy will be anointed. Is it referring to Jesus' baptism? Well, let's keep reading. Daniel 9:25 says, "Know therefore and understand that from the going forth of the command to restore and build Jerusalem until Messiah the Prince, there shall be 7 weeks and 62 weeks." In this sentence, we see when the prophecy begins. It states, "From the going forth of the command to restore Jerusalem." But when was this command to restore Jerusalem given? The command was given in 457 before Christ by King Artaxerxes. Now we know when this prophecy starts, so let's make a chart. The command to restore Jerusalem was in 457 BC, and the construction phase was finished in 408 BC. Alright, pull out your calculator again and subtract 457 minus 408. The answer is 49. It took 49 years to restore Jerusalem. Or you could say 7 prophetic weeks. This part is the there shall be 7 weeks. Are you still with me? The next part says and 62 weeks. If you multiply 62 times 7, you get 434. So it's saying 434 years later in the year 27 AD. And what happened 434 years later? Did something special happen in the year 27 AD? Yes, something special did happen. Jesus was baptized. Remember that in Daniel 9:24, it states that in this 70 weeks prophecy, it will anoint the most holy. Jesus was anointed in this year when he was baptized. This is what it was referring to. So let's look at the chart again and see what we have so far. Alright, looks good. We've talked about the first 7 weeks or 49 years and the 62 weeks or 434 years. Do you remember in the beginning of the video how many days in 70 weeks? It was 490 days, but we refer to them as years. 490 years. If you add up the years we have discussed, it's 483. That means we have how many years left until 490? 7 years left. We have one more prophetic week after Jesus was baptized. Daniel 9:26 says, and after the 62 weeks, the Messiah shall be cut off, but not for himself. And 3.5 years later, after the baptism of Jesus, he was crucified and died. But as scripture says, he didn't die for himself because he died for us. When he died, he made a new covenant, as Daniel 9:27 states. We can also read in this verse, but in the middle of the week, he shall bring an end to sacrifice and offering. Because effectively, once Jesus died in the middle of the last week or in the middle of the last 7 years, all sacrifices that were once done came to an end because Jesus was the ultimate sacrifice. The animal sacrifices that the Israelites used to do were no longer necessary because these sacrifices represented Jesus himself. So when Jesus died on the cross, the sacrifices were done forever. Matthew 27:50 states, and Jesus cried out again with a loud voice and yielded up his spirit. Then behold, the veil of the temple was torn in two from top to bottom. Then the earth quaked and the rocks were split. In the moment of Jesus' death, the veil of the temple was torn in two. This represented the end of old system of rituals and sacrifices. Let's look at the chart again. This is what we have so far. Okay, let's talk about the last part, the end of the 70-week prophecy. 3.5 years later after the death of Jesus, Stephen was stoned. Why did this mark the end of the 70-week prophecy? Because remember these 490 years, God had given Israel a second chance to become his people. But when they stoned Stephen, they were rejecting Jesus and God himself. They were rejecting the Messiah. From that point forward, they were no longer the chosen people of God. It was going to be people from different races and ethnicities. The Jewish nation sadly departed and God could no longer protect them like he used to. The only thing that was left, as we can read from Daniel 9:26, and the people of the prince who is to come shall destroy the city and the sanctuary. This was fulfilled when General Titus and his Roman army sacked Jerusalem in 70 AD. And for a long time it was left desolate as prophesied. To confirm this prophecy, in Matthew 18:21, Peter asked Jesus, how many times should he forgive his brother? 7 times? Jesus responds, up to 70 times 7. That number for Jesus was special. 70 times 7, he was forgiving Israel as a nation. 70 times 7 years, 70 weeks of years. He was giving the Jewish nation a second chance. So, to recap, this prophecy starts when the order was given to restore Jerusalem by King Artaxerxes in 457 BC, and it was rebuilt in 408 BC. This was 7 weeks of prophetic time, or 49 years. Next, we have 62 weeks until the Messiah is anointed, or 434 years until Jesus is baptized in 27 AD. And in the middle of the last week, or the last 7 years, Jesus was crucified in the year 31 AD. And the prophecy ends in the year 34 AD when Stephen is stoned. This video is only a small intro or a recap, as you want to call it. I recommend you to watch a sermon with more details. I'll add the links. I hope this helps you understand Daniel chapter 9 and the 70 weeks prophecy. God bless.